The sponsor of today's video is Surfshark, the affordable VPN service. Look, you concerned about protecting your online privacy and security? Surfshark's VPN service can help you do that. With Surfshark, your internet connection is encrypted, meaning your online activity is hidden from third parties who may be monitoring you. Surfshark also hides your IP address, making it more difficult for websites to track your activity or for hackers to target your device. But Surfshark doesn't just protect your privacy, it also gives you the freedom to access content that may be restricted in your location. With Surfshark, you can explore the internet without any limitations for a truly unrestricted browsing experience. And the best part, Surfshark is super affordable. When you use Surfshark's VPN to shop online, you can even save money. Other countries often have products at lower rates, and you can use Surfshark to hop over to some other country and purchase it there. Also, Surfshark's encryption and IP masking capabilities can also help protect your personal information and prevent online retailers from using your data to target you with higher prices. Don't miss out on your opportunity to protect your online privacy and security. Go to surfshark.deals/ITS and use the promo code ITS to get 83% off and 3 extra months for free. And now today's video. In 1966, the Rolling Stones sang, "Kids are different today, I hear every mother say. Mother needs something today to calm her down. And though she's not really ill, there's a little yellow pill." They were warning about the rising trend in Valium addiction and overdose. But instead of withdrawing their dangerous little pills, drug companies just made more under different names like Xanax, Klonopin, and Ativan and pushed them harder. People were taking it for anxiety, insomnia, depression, and it worked like a charm at first. What they didn't realize was that benzos are highly addictive, the withdrawals are horrific, and that in the long term, they make anxiety and insomnia worse. Plus, combined with alcohol or opioids, they can cause respiratory failure and death. Fatal overdoses involving benzos have reached 12,000 per year in the United States alone. Leo Sternbach discovered the first benzodiazepine in 1955, but he didn't know it. He'd been working on a tranquilizer to replace barbiturates, but after some initially disappointing results, he'd abandoned the project and is washing up. 2 years later, his co-worker, Earl Reader, finally decided a bit of spring cleaning was in order and noticed a nicely crystalline compound in one of Sternbach's discarded projects. The compounds had never been submitted for testing, so expecting very little, they gave some to some mice. The rodents immediately became calm and sleepy, just the effect they'd been searching for, and they realized they'd done it. They'd discovered a new compound that could replace the dangerously addictive barbiturates Americans had come to rely on during the Great Depression. They named it CHLORDIAZEPOXIDE, and by 1960s, it hit pharmacists' counters as Librium. Benzodiazepines work by enhancing the effect of gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, a neurotransmitter that occurs naturally in the brain. Its normal function is to reduce activity in the areas of the brain that control breathing, reason, memory, and emotions. When its effects are heightened, it induces calm, relaxes muscles, and shuts down anxiety. The drugs were seen as a miracle cure for stress, insomnia, and depression. Some were marketed to men as the perfect remedy for Cold War anxieties, but most were aimed at women. A highlight being a charming Serax oxazepam ad that pictured a woman in a cage made of mops and brooms, and it read, "You can't set her free, but you can help her feel less anxious." It went on to describe how tense, anxious, and irritable women trapped in the home and crushed under the monotony of child-rearing couldn't possibly be freed, but men could medicate them, so at least they'd stop whining about it. Hoffmann Roche was the first drug company to market the pills as Librium and then Valium. They took off as the don't give a darn pills embraced by Hollywood and the middle class, and by 1977, benzos had become the most prescribed medication globally. In 1978, 2.3 billion Valium pills were distributed to patients, generating $600 million. However, it wasn't long before people started noticing a similar problem as they'd had with the barbiturates that they were meant to replace. They were addictive, potentially lethal, and withdrawal sucked. Now, it would be nice to think that companies withdrew benzos from the market and put their efforts into finding a less damaging alternative, but of course they didn't. Instead, they just kept bringing out slightly different benzodiazepines with different names and new claims about being non-addictive. But at least these drugs like Klonopin, Xanax, and Ativan did come in lower dosages, so at least that's something, right? Well, no. Although the recommended dosages were much lower, the potency was a lot higher, so 1 milligram of Xanax or Klonopin equals 20 milligrams of Valium. It was all just clever marketing. So, why are benzos so addictive? Well, firstly, unlike many other recreational drugs, they don't induce an incredible high. No one is out having the best sex of their lives or staying out all night after taking a Xanax. They just make people feel not and that's an incredibly addictive feeling, especially if your day-to-day life is filled with anxiety, depression, or grief. Secondly, after just 3 weeks of use, which is not long if you're taking them for bereavement or extreme stress, giving them up will result in withdrawals. These are vomiting, shaking on the floor, wanting to die withdrawals. In the most severe cases, going cold turkey can result in seizures and even death. Many people keep taking the pills simply to avoid withdrawal. Finally, they have a rebound effect on anxiety, panic, insomnia, and depression. This means that when you stop use, all the symptoms you started taking them for will come back even stronger. So people can't sleep, have severe panic attacks, and suffer manic or depressive episodes. They'll go back to benzos just to make it stop. So why can't people just keep taking benzos? On their own, they're very unlikely to kill, and they account for only 3.6% of deaths by poisoning from a single drug. However, that doesn't mean they're side effect free. The most common complaints are sleepiness, cognitive impairment, and difficulty forming new memories. In the long term, users might also experience detachment from life, irritability, depression, behavioral problems, agoraphobia, fear and anxiety, and an inability to express feelings. Plus, taking them increases the risks of developing dementia, particularly Alzheimer's in later life. 6 months of benzo use increases the risk by 84%. Now, none of this sounds great, but the real risk of benzos is that they're often taken with other drugs. They suppress breathing, so if combined with opioids or alcohol, they can shut down respiratory function and cause death. More than half of fatal overdoses involve 3 or more drugs, and benzos are such a popular mixer drug that they're now implicated in more deaths than heroin, twice as many as cocaine, and over 15% of all fatal opioid overdoses. The reason they're taken in tandem with other drugs is that they prolong or improve the high. Fentanyl users have commented that benzos give the high legs, and heroin users say that they make their high even stronger. Another reason is that drug users are taking them to medicate their depression or anxiety, so they might take a benzo while they're feeling down, forget about it, and later use heroin, resulting in an OD. It might seem crazy, but it's also not uncommon for benzos to be legally prescribed alongside opioids. In fact, 17% of Americans with an opioid prescription also fill one for benzos. For example, if someone visits a doctor for back pain, they'll receive an opioid for the pain and a benzo to help them sleep while they recover. This prompted the FDA to issue a black box warning in 2016, highlighting the dangers of combining the two. Benzos are often overshadowed by the opioid crisis and are rarely mentioned in the media, presumably because it's best to focus on one prescription drug scandal at a time, but, well, just how bad is the benzo problem? Well, in the UK, there are currently around 300,000 users. In Australia, it's 1.5 million, or 5% of the population. And in the US, 30 million people currently use benzos, which is over 12.5% of adults. Of these, between 2 and 6% actually admit to misusing the drugs. These are incredible figures, considering they only count those that are legally prescribed, and the drugs are only recommended for use for between 2 and 4 weeks. So, why are doctors prescribing so many? Of course, one of the obvious reasons is money. Benzos are a $3.8 billion a year industry, so even though the pharmaceutical companies know the drugs were addictive and induced hideous withdrawals, they just kept making and marketing them. The 12 benzos Sternbach developed generated sales of over $10 billion in 40 years. He knew the problems with them, but it didn't stop him from making more. And he once told The New Yorker, "It's a very good drug. It has pleasant side effects. It's quite a good sleeping drug too. That's why it's abused. My wife doesn't let me take it." So, good enough for the public, but not for himself. The money doesn't all go to the developers and pharmaceutical companies, though. Some of it makes it to the doctors who seem sometimes happy to overprescribe. One of Colorado's worst offenders was Dr. John Hardy, a psychiatrist who prescribed enough benzos to medicate almost 1,000 patients for 6 months between 2013 and 2019. This was during a time when other physicians were attempting to cut back on their benzo prescriptions. He was increasing his. Of course, a closer look at his finances revealed that between 2014 and 2020, he received nearly $900,000 from drug companies, but those were for consulting and speaking engagements. Justice has been brought to some doctors, though. For example, Dr. Anthony Ho, who practiced in South Denver, became known as the prescriber of the Holy Trinity, a lethal combination of muscle relaxants, opioids, and benzos. His reasoning was that it was easier to prescribe medications than to engage in the difficult discussions that could result from conducting the necessary investigation to root out these issues. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation and banned from prescribing, but he remains a licensed doctor, which is pretty scary. Nursing homes are another huge issue. It's widely acknowledged that the group most at risk when taking benzos are those over 65. This is because the sedation causes confusion, unsteadiness, and dizziness, which in the elderly causes falls. Hugh Batty, who worked in senior care for many years, summarized it best when he said, "You get someone 85 and you give them Xanax. Christ almighty, unless you have someone on each side of them when they're walking, they're going to fall down. And a broken hip at that age is essentially a death sentence." So why is benzo use sky high in nursing homes? You'd think they want to avoid toppling their residents. And the answer is, again, money. Budget cuts and staff shortages in many care homes mean there aren't enough workers to monitor the residents. So instead of hiring more staff, some homes choose to sedate their residents, making them easier to control. Nice. Another reason for the excessive use of benzos is the rise in anxiety and depression. In America alone, 40 million people a year are diagnosed with anxiety. Cognitive behavioral therapy and antidepressants like SSRIs are the safest treatments available, but they're slow to work. Most doctors comment that their patients don't want to wait weeks or months to feel better. They want a magic pill, and that's what benzos provide. One user described it like this: "If you pop an Ativan, the anxiety goes away in 10 minutes. It's enormously addicting." This poses a massive problem, as even if doctors only prescribe for the recommended 2 to 4 weeks, the patients will want to continue use. In the US, this leads to doctor shopping, where people travel to multiple practices to receive prescriptions after they've been cut off. In the UK, people turn to the illicit drug market. The UK recognized the problem with benzos much sooner than the United States, mostly because in 1992, 14,000 patients brought the largest ever class action lawsuit against manufacturers for knowingly downplaying and withholding knowledge of benzodiazepine's potential for harm. Unfortunately, the case stalled when legal aid was withdrawn and they ran out of money. It then fell through at a cost of £30 million. Although those affected were left without compensation, their efforts did succeed in dampening prescription rates, and benzos became classified as a Schedule III controlled drug. But of course, a legal prescription is not the only way to obtain benzos, and a huge illegal market now supplies millions. Frustratingly for law enforcement, the pills are cheap and easy to make. In the UK, suppliers buy in the active ingredients and assemble them with simple pill presses in their homes. It's a hard manufacturing process to track down, as there's no chemical odor or huge spike in heat or electricity usage. It's also more difficult to pick up shipments of ingredients than ready-made pills. Pre-COVID, many dealers were reluctant to sell benzos as they reduced heroin sales. Plus, the side effect of memory impairment led to customer issues like them forgetting where they put their money or when they'd arranged to meet. However, the pandemic led to a drop in heroin supply, and as benzos were being made in flats and garages in the UK, they were still available. So dealers added them to their offering and sold the pills for between 50p and £2 each. This makes them pretty affordable high, worsening the issue. People addicted to benzos without a dealer have also found that they could just order the drugs from online pharmacies. They know that the doctors reviewing their prescriptions are fake, and so are 50% of the pills. But for many who've been cut off by their own doctor, they feel it's their only choice. One UK resident lost custody of her son after the side effects of her online benzo addiction became life-debilitating. She described her life on the drugs like this: loss of memory, lethargy, lack of motivation, depression, pains, headaches, chills. I could not function for a good part of the day, and for the other part I thought I was functioning, but I wasn't. And I couldn't get out of bed. I just felt like life was pointless. I think that was the lowest point for me, really realizing that I had no desire to live. The tragedy is that benzos end up inflicting the very symptoms people started taking them to avoid, and by then, they feel the only way to relieve the anxiety and depression is to take more. Unfortunately, until more money is funneled into real solutions to the mental health crisis rather than profit-driven drug companies, and people are given proper support to get off benzos, it's not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon.